Yeah, why, we listened to see if we hear a shot, you know, when old Lewis went out, and never did hear one. And next morning, it wasn't the same guy. It was another guy come and got us, took us uptown to the courthouse. Well, it first took us to the restaurant and fed us breakfast. And we got to go in the bathroom and wash up. And so after breakfast, we went to the courthouse, and the old judge, he went and read off the names, and he come to this one guy, you know, and he wasn't there. And he asked the policeman where he was, and he said, well, the lock wasn't locked good, and he got it unlocked, and he left. And he said, well, that'll be 2 years for him when we catch him. Said, you boys just going to get 6 months. And, man, I just about fell over. I thought, man, 6 months out here in this desert.
Oh.
And anyhow, the old cop said, well, sir, said, I think you ought to be a little lenient with them, because, said, this one guy could have left, and he stayed there with these other 2 boys. And he said, he could have left, and said, I think you ought to be a little bit more lenient with him. And he said, if you boys will promise never to ride another freight train, I'll let you go. But said, if we catch you again, it's going to be 1.5 years on the rock pile.
Wow.
Riding freight train, you know. And so we promised we would never ride another. So he told us to get out of there then.
So you got out and looked for a freight train right away?
No, that was about 10:30 in the morning, and we tried to catch a ride all day out of Barstow, and nobody picked us up. And so that night, we didn't have any money to buy anything. I think we had 9 cents or something like that, not very much. And so we walked out of Barstow about a mile, and I went to a farmhouse. Or we did, and we stopped there, and the other 2 boys, they wouldn't go and ask for nothing to eat, and I told them, well, I'm going to go knock on the door and see if they've got anything to feed us. And some woman come to the door, and I told her my story, and so she said, well, you go out and sit on the wagon, you and the other 2 boys, and said, I'll be out in a minute with something to eat. And she come out there, and she had a paper sack full of sandwiches and had a half a gallon of milk and I don't know what all else. And she gave it to us and told us, I asked her if we could stay there in the barn that night, and she said, yeah. And so we eat that and stayed there in the barn that night. Next morning we got up and we run across that dry river. It was a river, but it was dry, you know,
yeah.
No water in it. And we caught this train going to...
Oh, you did catch it.
Yeah, well, we knew it wasn't going to be any other way.
Yeah.
Took your chances.
Yeah. Anyhow, we drove to Bakersfield, and we got down to there. Why, we stayed all night in Bakersfield. And next morning, we got out on the highway, and we couldn't catch a ride. So we was close to the railroad tracks, and a train come by going pretty slow, so we run and caught it. And we got into Fresno about 10 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
It was 5 days from El Paso to Fresno.
Man. 5 rough days. Wow.
Yeah, and then I went in, this 9 cents, had a sign there on the front of this little store after we got into Fresno there. And I went in there, and we was hungry. We hadn't eaten that night, because the night before is when that woman fed us. But anyhow, why, I went and got this loaf of bread, and I took it up to the counter. And there was a guy standing there, and he said, you just get off that train? I said, yeah. He said, you looking for a job? I said, sure are. I said, I got 2 buddies outside that want the job too. He said, I got a job for you. He said, about 2 hours. And he said, you got anything to go with that bread? I said, no. I said, I ain't got no money either. And he told that storekeeper, said, give him a pound of bologna meat and some sandwich spread and some Cokes. And so she got it and gave it to me, and he told me, he said, I'll pay for that So I went outside. He told me to wait outside on him. And he come outside, and we got in the back of the pickup. He rode us out there on Kearney Boulevard and about Valentine. He had a big plum orchard out there.
They have those palm trees then out
Oh,
there?
yeah, and them oleanders.
Yeah.
I thought that was the prettiest thing I ever seen.
How big were they then, those palms?
Big as they are now.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Isn't that something, hon?
Yeah.
But anyhow, we picked them plums about an hour and a half, got him a load of plums. And he paid us 50 cents a piece. And so he took us in over on C Street and 41 and told us, he said, you stand here, and he said, this 41 goes right into Crothers. We told him we was going to Crothers.
Uh-huh.
And he said, you'll get a ride. And the first car come along, we got a ride going to Crothers. And the old boy had a brand new Pontiac. And there was two of them, and us three got in the back seat, and him and his friend was in the front, the one that picked us up. And he asked me who we're going to see, and I told him. He said, I know him. He said, I'm going right in front of his house.
Who was it?
Grandpa Phillips, my grandpa. My dad's dad.
Uh-huh.
Anyhow, he took us down there, and old Lewis, the one that got out of jail and took off, he'd been there 2 days and already was working.
You tell him what that judge said?
Yeah. Granddad told us, he said, you boys got a job to go to work in the morning. So that was my trip out here the first time.
Wow.